Senator McIntyre.
And thank you for being here today. This really helps our work. I have a question for you, Mr. Spratt, that the concern about, and you mentioned this, the maximum penalties allotted for certain offenses in Bill C-45. And I'll give you an example. Distribution to a minor under Section 9. This puts the offense under the purview of serious criminality. The challenge I have with this bill, it's introducing serious criminality for offenses that didn't exist before, and it's like, for example, for serious offenses, it's not serious criminality as it is in this bill. And earlier this week, we also heard from the immigration. I'll have you answer that, then go to the immigration.
Yes, you're right. And part of the problem is when you look at the distribution offense specifically, it's a bit like the problem that we have with mandatory minimum sentences. It's a bit of a one-size-fits-all solution because currently in the criminal code, if you have possession for the purpose of trafficking or if you traffic under 3 kilograms of marijuana, so that could be just under 3 kilograms or even a joint, then the maximum punishment if proceeded by way of indictment is 5 years. This bill, if you traffic or possess for the purpose of trafficking 1,000 kilograms or 1 joint, it's the same maximum sentence. And that can lead to some of the immigration consequences that we've discussed earlier.
And so I go to the immigration implications of heightened, as you mentioned, of maximum penalties, such as potential for permanent residents to be convicted with a first offense and face deportation as a result. The unintended consequences of the act must be considered to ensure that Bill C-45 uniformly applies to all Canadians and doesn't sort of have a disadvantage. And you said that the courts, they look at the whole person, what they were doing here, and not at just this one. The federal courts are absolutely jam-packed, even worse than the Supreme Courts. This will really create havoc, I believe, in the federal court system.
Yes, in my practice, this is what I do all day long, is dealing with the criminality aspects of immigration. And I'm constantly writing legal opinions for use in criminal court by other lawyers or for judges so that they can understand the immigration consequences when they sentence somebody. And that's because we recognize that, for example, somebody who receives a suspended sentence and no jail time can still trigger a deportation order. And it's not a simple appeal process. In my experience, when you have an immigration and deportation appeal, first of all, the wait time to have an appeal is about 1 to 2 years. When you get to that first hearing, you are very rarely actually winning the appeal. You get what's called a stay of the deportation. And then you have to come back in anywhere from 1 to 5 years. So then you have an individual spending about, anywhere from, 3 to 7 years. I mean, I have an appeal for someone who was convicted in 2009. The final appeal is in 2020, and we've received stays throughout. So what does this mean in terms of cost, right? If you look at the Immigration Appeal Division and the Immigration Refugee Board, which is really in charge of all of these appeals, there's a huge backlog with family sponsorship appeals, for instance. So how are an increase of deportation appeals for people who, when you, on the face of it, from criminal court point of view, aren't really serious criminals, right? It's just triggered because of this maximum penalty. So even though they don't receive custodial time or anything even close to 6 months, all these consequences are being triggered. And so it's for the individual, it's a huge stress. People are nervous about traveling abroad while they have this active deportation order that's been stayed. You have, of course, Canada Border Services, who's also engaged because all these people usually have to go through a detention review hearing and then get bail, and then are on conditions for years. So it's effectively on bail for the entire duration of that appeal. So in essence, I think that whenever we talk about criminal laws and maximum penalties, I think we fail to see the immigration implications and the cost to the public.
Second round.